ancient Buddhist wisdom on letting go of regret and finding peace. Right now, in the quiet darkness, your mind might be wandering backward through the years, counting up the seasons you feel were spent on the wrong paths. Perhaps a cold, persistent hollow sits behind your sternum as you replay a choice made 10 or 20 winters ago, wondering how your life might have looked if you had chosen differently. You lie awake with cold feet tucked under heavy wool, watching the gray shadows move across the timber beams of your ceiling, burdened by the heavy impression that your most precious hours have slipped away unfulfilled. Feel the crisp night air moving gently through the small gap in your window frame, cooling the skin of your face while the thick duvet holds your limbs in warm safety. Outside, a light winter frost settles over the quiet world, silvering the dark bark of the garden trees and stilling the wind. The house around you has set down its daily creaks, resting in a deep, windless stillness. There are no clocks you need to check tonight, no calendars demanding your progress, and no phantom timeline demanding that you justify how you spent your youth. If a quiet voice inside tells you that your life has been permanently diminished by past mistakes, let that cold thought rest on the bedside table for now. The aching grief you feel for lost time does not mean you have ruined your story, nor does it prove that your spirit is irredeemable. It simply reveals that you have been measuring your life like a dwindling pile of coin, rather than seeing it as a forest floor that continuously renews itself. Tonight, no one will ask you to rewrite your history, and no spiritual exercise will force you to pretend that old losses did not hurt. Consider this quiet truth from the ancient mountain monasteries. The mind believes that lost years are like burnt scrolls that leave only ash. Yet true wisdom shows that past grief is merely the fallen foliage of an earlier season, gathering under the snow to nourish the deep roots of who you are becoming right now. The suffering of regret does not come from the years that passed, but from the desperate mental habit of trying to harvest fruit from a branch that dropped its leaves a decade ago. Peace returns when you realize that not a single hour was wasted, because even the dark, silent seasons were secretly preparing the rich soil beneath your feet. Maybe you have felt this quiet panic too, when the house grows dark and the silence forces you to face the unfulfilled dreams of your younger self. Perhaps you watch others move forward with apparent ease, while you feel trapped in the shadows of old detours that cost you dearly. You might worry that because you spent years in confusion or fear, you have fallen permanently behind some imaginary schedule written by the world. If your heart carries this heavy weight tonight, know that you are resting in gentle company. Let a slow breath draw the cool air into your nostrils, feeling your chest rise without any strain, and let it slip away as softly as water moving over river silt. You do not need to resolve every old regret before your eyes grow heavy tonight. Nor do you need to forgive yourself for every misstep before morning arrives. There is no examination here, and no requirement to repair the years that have already dissolved into memory. Tonight, you can simply lie still in the dark, allowing the cold winter needles of your past to decompose naturally beneath the heavy, quiet snow of this present moment. In a short while, our journey will lead us down a snowy forest trail where an old herbalist tends his winter soil beds, showing a grieving scholar why a brown, withered pine cone must drop its seeds into the dark earth before the green boughs can reach toward the sky. But right now, let your shoulders drop another inch into the mattress. Let the cool air rest upon your forehead. Allow your hands to lie motionless beside you, palms soft and uncurled. Release the tension held behind your eyes, and let your jaw rest softly in the dark. Listen to the steady, unhurried rhythm of your own breath as it flows in and out without your guidance. You do not need to rebuild your past tonight, dear friend, because an old pine forest does not weep over the needles it dropped last autumn. It simply lets them rest under the winter drift, knowing they are quietly transforming into the very ground that holds the tree steady against the wind. Picture a narrow mountain trail winding upward through an ancient pine forest as twilight settles over the high peaks. The air carries the cold, sharp scent of frozen pine resin and damp stone, mixed with the faint smoke of cedar wood burning in a distant hearth. Walking along this path is Master Eric, a weary former scholar whose dark wool cloak is frayed at the hem. His boots make a low, crunching sound as they press into the frozen layer of fallen needles covering the ground. For over 30 years, Eric lived inside the stone walls of a city archive, copying ancient histories and translating forgotten legal codes, believing that his dedication would eventually yield great honor or lasting wisdom. Instead, a sudden change in the provincial government stripped his position away, leaving him with empty hands, a small purse of coins, and a heavy ache in his chest. As he walks under the darkening canopy of trees, his mind loops endlessly back to his youth in the city. He replays the warnings of his late father, the alternative trades he might have learned, and the quiet family life he sacrificed for dusty manuscripts that no one reads anymore. The loss of his career feels like a physical hole behind his ribs, a cold void that the mountain wind seems to blow straight through. He feels that his entire adulthood was an elaborate error, a long detour that consumed his best strength and left him with nothing to show for the years. Ahead through the gray gloom, a small wooden gate marks the entrance to a winter garden nestled on a flat ledge of granite. Standing near a raised bed of dark soil is Elder Julian, an elderly herbalist who spends his winter months tending the roots of mountain plants under the snow. Julian wears a coarse gray robe tied with hemp rope, his hands stained dark from decades of working with damp loam, mountain peat, and herbal bark. The garden around him is quiet and still, stripped bare by the cold season, with only dark wooden stakes marking where summer herbs will rise again when the earth warms. Master Eric steps through the gate, stopping near the edge of the soil beds with his shoulders hunched against the biting frost. He looks at the silent, barren garden and speaks with a bitter tremor in his voice, asking how the herbalist can spend his days working in a place where everything has died and disappeared. Eric explains his own plight, his voice rising slightly as he speaks of 30 years spent in dark rooms, 40,000 pages copied, and a lifetime vanished into meaningless smoke. He tells Julian that he feels like a hollow shell, standing on the edge of winter with a wasted past and no future worth building. Elder Julian listens without interrupting, his face calm and unhurried like the gray stones surrounding the terrace. He reaches down into the frozen bed at his feet, his thick fingers moving gently through a layer of brown, decaying debris that sits above the frozen earth. He lifts a single weathered object from the soil and holds it out toward the scholar. It is a large pine cone, its scales tightly closed against the cold, its outer surface covered in dark gray dust and tiny crystals of frost. The bottom of the cone is soft and crumbling, turning into black humus where it rested against the wet soil. Julian asks the scholar to take the pine cone into his own hand and describe what he holds. Eric hesitates, then takes the cold object, feeling its rough, sharp scales pressing against his palm. He mutters that it is merely a dead cone, a piece of forest refuse that dropped from a branch months ago and rotted in the mud. He says it holds no value, no beauty, and no purpose, just like the decades he spent sitting over ancient inkpots in the city archives. The old herbalist shakes his head slowly, his breath forming a small white cloud in the freezing twilight air. He points toward the towering pine trees that frame the garden, their massive green boughs reaching 40 feet into the darkening sky. Julian tells Eric to look at the ground beneath those great trees, where millions of old needles and fallen cones have accumulated over hundreds of years. He explains that if those ancient needles had refused to drop, or if the soil had rejected the decaying cones as worthless trash, the great trees above would have starved within a single generation. Julian gently presses his thumb into the soft, crumbling base of the pine cone resting in Eric's palm. He notes that the dead cone is not separate from the living tree, nor is it a mistake that the forest seeks to erase. The cone fell, released its seeds, and began to rot so that its substance could blend with the cold mineral earth below. It is precisely this dark, decaying layer of past seasons that feeds the deep roots of the forest, providing the rich nourishment required for new green shoots to break through the winter crust when spring returns. Eric stands motionless on the granite ledge, staring down at the dust and crumbling scales coating his fingers. A quiet shock ripples through his mind, softening the sharp edges of his long-held grief. For 30 years, he had viewed his time in the archives as a solid, isolated block of lost life, a tragic era that ruined his destiny. Yet, as he looks at the dark humus staining his palm, He sees a different possibility. The years he spent in silence, the discipline of his long study, and the deep loneliness he endured were not useless scraps to be mourned. They were the dark, nutrient-rich soil that had been forming beneath his feet all along. The old herbalist takes the pine cone back from Eric and sets it gently down into the soil bed, covering it with a light layer of loose needles to protect it from the deep frost of the coming night. He tells the scholar that a tree does not waste its strength, trying to pull its fallen leaves back onto the high branches. It simply allows the old seasons to settle into the ground, trusting that nothing is lost when it turns into the foundation for future growth. Eric looks at his own hands, noticing for the first time how steady and capable they remain despite his grief. The cold wind still whistles through the high pines above, and his future remains unwritten and uncertain in the gray light of the mountain evening. He has not magically recovered his lost decades, nor has his anxiety about the future completely vanished into the air. But as he steps back onto the snowy trail, the heavy, sharp knot behind his ribs feels slightly looser, replaced by a quiet curiosity about what might grow from the dark soil he has carried for so long. Yet as the twilight deepens into night and the stars begin to show through the pine needles, Eric knows that understanding a truth in the mind is different from feeling it in the marrow of his bones. He still carries the old habit of measuring his life against a clock that has already run down, and the deeper mystery of how to live without regret remains hidden beneath the winter snow. This quiet scene in the herbalist's garden is not a directive to erase your memory, nor does it demand that you view your past grief with detached indifference. Ancient Buddhist reflections do not ask you to freeze your heart into a block of winter ice, nor do they suggest that your sadness over lost time is foolish. When the herbalist points to the dark layer of soil beneath the pines, he is pointing to a soft, natural truth about human emotion that we forget when we are drowning in regret. Consider what happens inside your mind when an old memory surfaces during the late hours. Attachment in this space is not simply remembering a day from 10 years ago. Attachment is the tight, desperate reflex that demands a past event must change its shape, holding an old decision up to the cold light and insisting it should have yielded a different outcome. It is like trying to reach backward through time to grab a falling autumn leaf, gripping empty air while your own knuckles turn white from the strain. We confuse this bitter reliving with honesty, believing that if we suffer enough over an old mistake, we might somehow pay off an invisible debt. The ancient teachers observed that human sorrow almost always arrives in two distinct movements. The first movement is the actual loss or redirection that took place in your physical life. A career path dissolved, a relationship ended, or years were spent in a place that eventually yielded no harvest. This is the natural frost of existence, cold to the touch and undeniably real. It represents the original weight of living, an experience that every human heart must pass through as the seasons change. The second movement, however, is where our ongoing agony takes root. It occurs when we take that past season and refuse to let its dead needles settle into the earth. We pick up an old year, dust off its grief, and weave a bitter story around it, claiming that its presence permanently ruined the rest of our lives. The initial event was merely a pine cone falling from a high branch in a storm. The secondary suffering is our endless demand that the cone remain suspended in midair, forever refusing to let it touch the ground where it can finally decompose. When timeless wisdom speaks of letting go, it does not mean forgetting where you came from, nor does it mean pretending that your past detours were pleasant. True release is much gentler than forced forgetfulness. It is the quiet willingness to stop dragging an old, withered season into your current room. It is allowing the events of yesterday to rest down in the dark earth beneath your feet, trusting that their substance can break down and nourish the living roots of your present character. Think of how mindfulness feels when translated into the language of your Latinite thoughts. Mindfulness is not a harsh mental broom that sweeps your mind clear of every old memory. It is simply the cool, spacious night air that observes a painful memory rising, notices its sharp edges, and chooses not to wrap both hands around it. It is the steady awareness that sees an old regret drift past like a cloud of steam, recognizes it as a phantom shape made of memory, and lets it dissolve without building a shrine around its memory. When we lack this spacious awareness, craving quietly takes control of our internal world. In the landscape of regret, craving is the subtle ache that insists true peace resides only in an alternate timeline, a past where we made every right choice and avoided every sorrow. We tell ourselves that if only we could go back to 22, or if only we had taken that other path, we would finally be complete, whole, and worthy of rest. But because the past is physically unalterable, living in that phantom world keeps us perpetually starving in the present hour. Impermanence offers us an extraordinary refuge from this mental prison. Many people hear the word impermanence and feel a quiet dread, assuming it means everything they love will be taken away. But when your chest is heavy with the weight of spent years, impermanence is the sweetest relief imaginable. It guarantees that no past mistake holds permanent power over your spirit, no period of confusion lasts forever, and no old choice defines the entirety of who you are. The past is not a solid granite wall blocking your path. It is merely an old layer of needles already turning into soft, dark soil beneath the snow. If we allow this natural cycle to occur, compassion blossoms softly within us. Compassion begins when you stop treating your younger self as an enemy who ruined your life. It is the warm realization that the person you were 10 years ago was acting out of whatever light, fear, or understanding they possessed at that moment. You would never stand over a young sapling in a storm and curse it for bending in the wind. Yet you routinely berate your younger self for struggling to find the path through an unfamiliar forest. As you lie here in the quiet room, notice how your mind might try to turn this insight into a new source of pressure. You might catch a subtle voice suggesting that you ought to have forgiven yourself years ago, or that you are somehow failing by still feeling a pinch of old grief. That subtle self-criticism is just another way of trying to force the forest to bloom on your own rigid command. Let that sharp expectation drop away into the dark. You do not need to achieve perfect emotional resolution before you fall asleep. And you do not need to solve the grand story of your life tonight. The simple act of noticing the cycle is enough. Just as Master Eric stood on the cold ledge and saw the dark humus staining his palm, simply recognizing that your past can become the quiet foundation for your wisdom is the moment the heavy burden begins to loosen its grip. In a few moments, we will engage in a quiet internal practice that allows your body to experience this returning directly, placing an old memory gently into the dark earth of your breath. But for now, let the cool truth of this insight settle softly into your ribs, knowing that nothing true about you has ever been lost. If it feels comfortable for you in this moment, allow your breath to settle into a natural, effortless cadence. There is no need to measure the length of your inhalations, nor do you need to push the air deep into your abdomen with forceful intent. Simply observe how the cool night air enters through your nostrils, resting for a quiet second in your chest, before flowing back out like a gentle tide pulling away from a quiet shore. If your breath feels slightly shallow or restricted, let it remain exactly as it is without trying to correct it. Perhaps you might bring a soft awareness to the muscles around your eyes and temples. Notice if you are still holding a faint frown, as if trying to solve an old problem in the dark. You can let those tiny facial muscles unclench, allowing your forehead to broaden like a calm surface of water. Let your jaw unhinge slightly, creating a tiny space between your teeth, and let your tongue soften away from the roof of your mouth. Allow the full weight of your head to sink down into your pillow, trusting the bed to carry you completely without any effort on your part. As you lie here, a memory or a recurring regret might float into the field of your attention. It could be a specific year you wish had unfolded differently, a decision that still brings a faint sting, or a general feeling that you lost valuable time. Do not try to push this memory away with anger. Do not scold yourself for returning to old territory while trying to sleep. Look at it softly, as if you were observing a dry leaf carried into your room by the autumn wind. You might quietly name this internal habit with a single, gentle word. Perhaps you can silently say to yourself, looking back or mourning or measuring lost time. Giving a simple name to the mental pattern removes its power to pull you back into an internal argument. It turns a sharp, emotional reaction into an objective event passing through the spacious sky of your mind. Now, if it feels right, Bring to mind the image of a large weather-worn pine cone resting in your palm. Visualize its dry, dark scales tightly folded, its rough surface carrying the faint scent of sharp resin and cold winter earth. Feel its coldness and its small, firm shape resting lightly against your skin. This object is safe to hold, stable, and completely quiet. Imagine taking that specific regret, that memory of a lost year or a missed turn, and placing it gently into the tight scales of this pine cone. You do not need to press it hard, nor do you need to force every detail inside. Simply set the memory onto the rough scales, letting the pine cone hold the emotional shape of that past season for you. Imagine kneeling down beside a bed of soft, dark soil beneath the high branches of a winter forest. The ground is dark, cold and rich with the fallen needles of 100 previous autumns. Place the pine cone down into a small hollow in the soft soil. Watch as a light layer of loose brown pine needles settles over it, covering its dark scales with gentle care. Notice what happens to your body as that memory rests beneath the forest floor. You might feel a subtle release along the back of your neck. You might feel your ribs widen slightly as your lungs expand without resistance. The memory is still there, resting quietly down in the dark loam. But your hands are now entirely empty, resting loosely against your sheets. If another old year or another lingering regret rises up in your thoughts, you can place that one into the soil as well. Watch how the earth receives every fallen season without judgment, without rushing, and without asking you to dig it back up. The quiet soil takes the cold, dry pine cone and begins its slow, natural work of breaking it down, turning old grief into rich, dark nourishment for the living roots beneath the snow. Perhaps you can imagine a soft, fresh layer of white snow beginning to fall through the quiet pine boughs above. See the small, silent flakes descending through the dark air, settling over the brown needles and covering the ground in a smooth, pristine blanket of white. Each falling flake adds a quiet layer of peace over the buried past, cooling the old heat of your regret and smoothing out every uneven ridge on the forest floor. There is no need to force a sudden wave of deep emotional transformation tonight. You do not have to feel completely free of your past before your eyes close in sleep. The intention of this quiet reflection is not to erase your history, but to change how you hold it while your body rests, even if you only feel a momentary drop in tension before your mind drifts into other thoughts. That brief pause is a quiet gift to your weary spirit. Whenever you notice your mind wandering back to old timelines or future worries, gently bring your attention back to the physical feeling of your body lying in the dark. There is no error in wandering, and no need to judge your busy mind. You simply return, like a traveler stepping back onto a soft, snowy path after looking out across a windy canyon. Let your breath remain unhurried, quiet, and smooth, flowing through you with no extra push or control. Feel the gentle rise of your chest as air arrives and the deep, heavy release as the air slips away back into the quiet room. You are not holding up your past right now. The quiet night is holding both you and your history together, resting safely within the peaceful stillness of this cold, quiet season. In a short while, our narrative will journey to an ancient stone observatory high on a granite peak, where an old astronomer shows a grieving scholar what happens when we stop trying to measure our lives with a falling glass of sand. But for now, remain here with your steady breath, letting your physical body enjoy this simple, deep rest away from the work of measuring time. The morning sky over the upper pass opened in shades of cold pearl and slate, casting a long, crisp light across the snow-covered pine ridges. Master Eric continued his ascent toward the highest crest of the range, carrying a leather satchel that felt noticeably lighter across his shoulder, though the old habit of counting his missing years still flickered in his mind like a cold shadow. By midday, the narrow mountain trail emerged onto a high, circular stone terrace known as the Ridge Observatory. Ancient slate walls, weathered by centuries of alpine gales, enclosed an open courtyard where stone dials sat silent beneath a thin layer of frost. Standing near the center of the courtyard was Master Sylvan, a retired temple astronomer who had spent 50 years tracking the subtle shifts of northern constellations. Sylvan was a tall, lean man with hair as white as winter snow, wearing a heavy dark cloak lined with coarse wool. On a stone pillar before him rested a tarnished brass hourglass filled with coarse gray river sand. The upper bulb of the glass was half empty, dropping steady, silent grains through its narrow throat into the lower chamber. The faint, whispering hiss of the falling sand was the only sound breaking the vast silence of the peak. Eric approached the pillar, his eyes fixing upon the slipping gray grains with an immediate familiar tightness in his chest. As he watched the sand disappear from the top bulb, a sudden, sharp wave of grief crashed over him, far more intense than the quiet ache he had felt in the garden below. This glass was an unyielding, physical demonstration of his greatest terror, a visual proof that time was relentlessly draining away, leaving him with less and less of his life with every passing second. He felt a sudden, frantic urge to grab the brass frame, turn the glass upside down, and stop the falling sand before the upper chamber emptied completely. Master Eric raised a trembling hand and struck the side of the stone pillar in anger. The jolt caused the brass hourglass to tip over, striking the edge of the stone terrace with a loud metallic clatter. The thin glass bulb shattered into 100 clear fragments, scattering across the dark flagstones, while the coarse river sand poured out in a loose, gray heap over the frozen rock. Eric froze, horrified by his own sudden outburst, expecting the old astronomer to react with sharp condemnation for destroying a delicate instrument. Master Sylvan did not shout, nor did he rush forward to scold the scholar for his destructive impulse. He simply stood beside the stone pillar, his hands tucked deep into his wide wool sleeves, watching the dark sand spread across the icy floor. The wind blew a light spray of fine grit across their boots, mixing the river sand with the scattered pine needles that had drifted over the terrace walls from the forest below. Sylvan looked at Eric with calm, clear eyes, asking the scholar if breaking the glass had succeeded in stopping the sun from moving across the sky. Eric dropped to his knees on the cold flagstones, his hands hovering over the broken glass and spilled sand. A deep, heavy sob tore from his throat as he admitted his absolute terror of the slipping hours. He confessed that watching the sand drop through the glass felt like watching his own life bleed out onto the stone, leaving him stranded on a barren peak with nothing built, nothing saved, and no way to reclaim the years he had thrown away in the archive. His voice cracked against the cold stone walls, raw and unshielded in the high mountain air. Master Sylvan slowly stepped down from the stone dais and knelt beside the scholar in the snow. He did not offer empty assurances, nor did he tell Eric that his lost years did not matter. Instead, the old astronomer reached out his broad hand and scooped up a small pile of the spilled river sand, mixing it directly with the damp, dark pine soil that had gathered in the cracks between the flagstones. Sylvan held the mixture out toward the scholar's face, pointing to the tiny gray grains of sand resting comfortably against the rich black earth. He explained that the hourglass was a human invention built to trap time inside an artificial prison, convincing the mind that life is a fragile, dwindling supply of grain falling into an empty void. But time in the living world is not a narrow glass throat, nor is it a countdown moving toward a final loss. Time is the wide, open sky above the peak, where every fallen grain of sand becomes part of the granite path beneath their feet. The old astronomer pointed toward a small, green mountain saxifrage plant growing quietly out of a deep fissure in the terrace wall. He noted that the tiny plant was rooted directly in a crevice filled with crushed stone, old sand, and decayed pine needles from earlier centuries. The plant did not mourn the mountain that had eroded to create its soil, nor did it measure how much sunlight remained before winter returned. It simply drew its nourishment from the dark, mixed loam where it rested, spreading its tiny, resilient leaves against the freezing air. A profound, quiet stillness settled over Eric as he looked at the green leaf rising out of the crushed rock. He realized that his habit of viewing his life as an emptying hourglass was merely an illusion created by his own fearful thoughts. He had spent years treating time as a harsh judge who was constantly deducting points from his existence, rather than seeing it as the very earth that supported his every step. The years he had spent copying manuscripts were not grains of sand lost down a dark drain. They were the solid, crushed stone that formed the ground he stood upon in this present hour. Master Sylvan reached into his cloak and pulled out a small wooden broom and a brass pan. He handed the broom to Eric without a word. Eric took the handle, his fingers steadying against the smooth cedar wood. He did not sweep with frantic haste, nor did he try to separate the broken glass from the river sand. He simply took a slow, deep breath, felt the cold mountain wind against his neck, and swept the spilled sand gently toward the edge of the courtyard wall, where it fell loosely into the deep pine grove below to blend with the forest floor. As he swept the last grains of sand from the flagstones, Eric felt a small, subtle shift take root deep inside his chest. The heavy, desperate demand to go back and alter his past had quietly vanished, replaced by a simple willingness to be where he was. He was still a man with gray hair at his temples, still a former scholar without an archive, and still uncertain of where his path would lead tomorrow. But he no longer felt shattered like the glass bulb on the stone. He felt as vast, steady, and quiet as the granite peak itself, grounded in the dark, rich soil of everything he had ever lived through. When we look closely at the architecture of our Latinite grief, we uncover a subtle pattern that runs through almost every human life. We tend to operate as though our contentment were a fragile flower that can only bloom if the weather of our past was flawless. When an old season brings cold winds, unexpected frost, or a long period of drought, we view those events as personal betrayals by time itself. We look backward and convince ourselves that because a certain decade did not unfold according to our hopeful plans, our entire story has been permanently ruined. Yet the core insight of Buddhist psychology invites us to look at our inner life through a far wiser lens. Consider the difference between the inevitable frost that falls upon a forest and the heavy, suffocating blanket of smoke we create when we try to burn the frozen trees down in anger. The primary weight of existence consists of the actual events that take place in our lives. An old path closes, a cherished project ends without praise, an important relationship fades into silence, or our physical energy naturally shifts as the years move forward. These are cold, objective facts of a changing world, like a sudden snowfall settling over high pine boughs. The extra suffering we experience, however, is manufactured entirely inside our own thinking. It is the mental heat we generate when we take an old loss and demand that it explain itself to us one more time. We take a single past choice and wrap it in 50 layers of self-punishment, rehearsing the alternative scenarios over and over until our minds are completely exhausted. We mistake this bitter mental loop for a form of moral duty, believing that if we punish ourselves severely enough for our past confusion, we might somehow earn a cleaner, happier present. This habit of self-judgment is like standing in a cold winter forest and cursing the soil for holding decaying leaves beneath the snow. We look at our younger selves with sharp disapproval, forgetting that the person we were 10 years ago was navigating the dark with whatever limited light they had at that moment. We demand that our past self should have possessed the wisdom we only gained by surviving the very mistakes we now condemn. This creates a painful split inside our chest, turning our own memory into an enemy territory where we can never truly rest. Many of us have turned our lingering regret into a core piece of our identity. We have rehearsed the story of our lost years for so long that we feel naked without the familiar weight of our sorrow. We worry that if we stop mourning our past mistakes, we will become complacent, careless, or foolish, dropping our guard and allowing time to slip away from us once again. We hold on to our grief as if it were a protective shield, mistaking our inner harshness for a necessary form of discipline. This fear, however, is merely another trick played by a tired mind trying to protect itself from future pain. Shame does not heal an old wound, nor does self-punishment restore a single hour that has passed. When an elder herbalist tends a bed of soil under the snow, he does not scold the earth for holding decaying roots. He knows that the dark, rich humus is not a sign of death, but the quiet preparation for the green life that will rise when the air turns warm. Treating your own spirit with patience is the only way to allow your past to turn into genuine wisdom. Notice how often your mind uses the fear of the future to keep you trapped in the past. When you lie awake staring at the dark ceiling, your thoughts naturally rush forward to construct elaborate plans to protect yourself from another wasted season. You try to calculate every outcome, prearrange every detail, and guarantee your safety through pure mental effort. Yet this relentless need to control tomorrow is simply the twin sister of our regret over yesterday. Both arise from the false belief that we must tame time itself before we are allowed to be at peace. Real freedom does not arrive when you successfully eliminate every uncertainty from your horizon, nor does it come when you erase every old regret from your memory. Freedom begins in the single, quiet moment when you stop treating your past as a crime and stop treating your future as a battleground. It is the realization that you can stand in the middle of your life today, feeling the cold air against your face, without needing your past to be clean or your future to be guaranteed. The ancient path reminds us that our primary awareness is fundamentally different from the thoughts that pass through it. Your true nature is like the vast, silent winter sky that holds both the dark clouds and the pale sunlight without being changed by either. Your past mistakes are not permanent stains upon your soul, and your lost years have not stripped away your capacity for deep, quiet joy. They are simply old weather patterns that have already dissolved into the soft, dark earth beneath your feet. When you lie in the dark tonight, replaying a moment where you feel you failed or took a wrong turn, try to notice the exact line where the original event ends and your inner commentary begins. The original event was merely a choice made in a different year, a moment that has long since vanished from the physical world. The extra weight is the heavy story you continue to build around it, insisting that you should have been wiser, faster, or more capable than you were. You are fully permitted to drop that extra story right now, leaving it to rest in the dark alongside your daytime clothes. You do not need to settle every old debate inside your head before your eyes close, and you do not need to prove to anyone that your life was lived without detours. For these quiet hours of the night, you can step off the treadmill of self-measurement, allowing your tired spirit to settle into the quiet, unburdened ground of this present breath. This quiet understanding of time is not a philosophy meant to stay hidden in cold mountain observatories or quiet garden terraces. It is a subtle, practical way of stepping through the rush of your modern hours tomorrow. When you wake and enter the bright glare of your routine, the world will offer you its usual array of silent pressures. Small glowing screens will display the rapid movements of other people's lives. Calendars will announce approaching deadlines, and old memories will attempt to convince you that you are lagging far behind where you ought to be. Consider those familiar afternoons when you sit at a desk, looking at a digital timeline that shows the achievements of peers, old classmates, or distant acquaintances. You see their new career titles, their settled homes, and their visible progress, while your own life feels like an erratic path filled with long detours and unfulfilled plans. A sharp spike of envy or inadequacy rises in your chest, telling you that your past choices were fatal errors that placed you permanently behind the rest of the world. In that exact moment, you are standing where Master Eric stood, looking at a spilling hourglass and believing that your time has been irretrievably lost down a narrow glass neck. When that familiar panic visits you tomorrow, you do not need to fight it with bitter self-defense or forced optimism. You can pause for a single breath, feel the solid floor beneath your feet, and remember that no two trees in an alpine forest share the same soil or grow at the same speed. The tall pine does not look down on the mountain saxifrage for growing close to the rocks, nor does the saxifrage curse its own small roots for taking 30 years to find water in a granite crack. Your past detours were not empty delays. They were the precise weather required to form the unique, resilient ground you occupy right now. Or think of those late evenings when you reach for your phone in the dark, checking for a message or a subtle sign of reassurance from someone in your life. You refresh the screen, waiting for a reply, feeling a knot of quiet tension gather in your stomach as the minutes pass in silence. Your mind immediately begins to construct elaborate, painful narratives, assuming that the delay proves you are unvalued, forgotten, or difficult to love. You are attempting to force the sand of another person's timeline to drop through the glass at your preferred speed. When you notice your hand reaching for that screen out of anxiety tomorrow, try to grant yourself a brief, compassionate pause. Set the device face down on a wooden surface. Take one slow inhalation, and let the air cool your throat before you react. Remind yourself that silence from another person is merely a quiet space in the day, not a dark verdict upon your worth. You can allow relationships to breathe and unfold at their own pace, holding them with open palms like a handful of dry forest soil, rather than squeezing them so tightly that the sand slips out through your fingers. You might also recognize the quiet fatigue that comes from wearing a cheerful mask while carrying a heavy heart. You walk into meetings, family gatherings, or casual social settings with a polite smile, offering light answers while an inner voice continuously lists your perceived failures and missed turns. You feel exhausted from pretending that your life has been a seamless sequence of triumphs, yet you fear that if you show your true vulnerability, others will judge you as weak or broken. If that familiar weight presses against your chest tomorrow, remember that a forest floor is never made of pristine, polished marble. The dark loam that sustains the tallest cedars is composed entirely of fallen needles, decayed bark, broken twigs, and old cones that dropped in earlier storms. True strength does not mean presenting a flawless, unblemished surface to the world. True strength is the quiet maturity that accepts all your past seasons, including the messy, confused, and painful ones, as the very substance that gives your character its depth, warmth, and resilience. You do not need to earn the right to rest at the end of a long day by proving that you achieved total productivity. Rest is not a rare reward reserved only for those who have resolved every old regret and perfected their future plans. If you feel a wave of subtle guilt when you lie down to rest tomorrow night, recognize that guilt as an old, habituated story that treats your life like a commercial balance sheet. A bed of soil beneath the winter snow does not apologize for resting through the dark months. It yields completely to the frost, knowing that stillness is the essential quiet labor that prepares the earth for spring. Tomorrow will offer you dozens of tiny opportunities to practice this gentle release. When you make a minor mistake at work, or when a planned event falls apart at the last moment, you will feel the initial spark of frustration or self-reproach rise in your chest. That first sting is simply the natural frost landing on your branches. You do not need to hate yourself for feeling human. The quiet practice lies in the breath that follows. Instead of picking up that momentary error and weaving 20 years of past regret around it, you can simply notice the feeling. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears and allow the breath to leave your body smoothly. You can choose not to obey every critical sentence generated by a tired brain. You can let an old memory sit quietly in your awareness like a fallen pine cone, without picking it up to measure how much time it cost you. You can care deeply about your future, your loved ones, and your work without holding your life in a vice-like grip of panic. You can do your best in this single hour, attending to the simple task before you, and then step back with uncurled fingers, allowing time to carry the results forward as it will. This is not passive resignation. It is the quiet, profound wisdom of a spirit that has stopped warring against its own history. As the late hours settle deeper around your home, let these simple applications rest softly in your mind. You do not have to execute them perfectly tomorrow morning, and you do not need to transform your entire personality by sunrise. Simply carry the quiet image of the winter pine forest with you as your body settles into the dark. Know that every time you choose to pause before reacting, every time you drop an old comparison, and every time you allow yourself to rest without guilt, you are letting the dead needles of your past decompose into soft, rich earth, leaving your spirit grounded, quiet, and clear. Now, as the deepest hours of the night gather softly in the corners of your room, the air feels cool, steady, and vast. The lingering thoughts that chased each other through your mind earlier have begun to lose their sharp edges, dissolving gently into the dark silence like small clouds dissolving into an alpine sky. There is no longer any reason to measure the years, no reason to evaluate your progress, and no need to construct an explanation for the path you have walked. Everything you have ever been, every detour you have ever taken, and every old regret you have carried has settled down into the soft, dark earth beneath your life. Imagine the high pine forest in the dead of winter, wrapped in total, unmoving quiet. The wind has dropped completely, leaving the tall green boughs standing motionless beneath the heavy gray sky. Below the trees, a fresh, clean blanket of white snow covers the dark forest floor, laying a pristine, seamless layer over every old trail, every fallen branch, and every decaying pine cone. Beneath that cold, quiet blanket, the dark soil sits warm, rich, and still, holding the hidden seeds of future seasons in safe, undisturbed darkness. There is no sound here except for the soft, quiet whisper of your own breath moving in and out of your body. Your lungs expand gently, bringing the cool night air into your chest, and then release it back into the dark room without any effort, without any rush, and without any control. With every slow exhalation, your physical body sinks an inch deeper into the warm mattress beneath you. Your legs are heavy, soft, and still, like great cedar roots resting deep within the winter earth. Your arms lie motionless beside you, your hands completely uncurled, open and empty of all labor. Allow your mind to become as wide and still as that snow-covered forest floor. You do not need to clean your past tonight, nor do you need to prepare your spirit for tomorrow. The old hourglass that once filled your heart with panic has shattered into harmless dust, and its coarse river sand has blended completely with the dark soil below. Time is no longer a dwindling supply of grain slipping away through a narrow throat. It is the wide, quiet space that holds you safely in its arms while you rest. Feel the heavy warmth spreading through your shoulders, easing the quiet ache that accumulated through your long study of the past. Your neck softens completely into the pillow, releasing its final hold on the day. The fine muscles around your eyes relax into total dark, and your jaw rests soft and unclenched. There is no one watching you in this quiet room, no record being kept of your thoughts, and no standard you must meet to earn this moment of deep restoration. Let the quiet wisdom of the soil settle deep into your marrow. The forest does not weep over the leaves it dropped 10 autumns ago, nor does it strain to force its green boughs to bloom in the middle of a winter night. It simply yields to the quiet season, resting in the dark, trusting that the decaying past is secretly nourishing the deep roots below. You are permitted to yield to your own quiet season right now. You are permitted to let the fallen needles of your old years rest undisturbed beneath the snow, knowing that nothing essential about you has ever been lost. Your breath grows even slower now, even quieter, moving like a faint mountain breeze drifting through high, silent pines. Inhalation arrives like a cool whisper, and exhalation leaves like a soft shadow slipping into the dark. Each gentle cycle carries you further away from the waking world, drawing you down into the warm, safe depths of an undisturbed rest. You are stepping off the long trail of your memories, leaving every old map behind, and returning to the timeless home that has been waiting inside your own quiet chest all along. The dark hours will protect you through the night, holding your home steady, while the quiet earth turns beneath the winter stars. There are no answers you need to find before morning, no old choices you need to repair, and no future you need to guarantee. You are safe to let go of your story now. You are safe to let your awareness expand into the dark, peaceful ocean of deep, dreamless sleep. As the last quiet words dissolve into total silence, let your heart rest upon this one gentle thought. What if the years you believed were wasted were never a loss at all, but the dark, rich soil quietly preparing you for the moment you finally learned to rest? And what if the quiet soil beneath the snow has always known precisely how to hold every season of your life without judgment or regret? In this vast, undisturbed dark, the old trails of your memory fade completely into shadow. The cool night air wraps around your bed like a soft linen shroud, offering a quiet sanctuary where time no longer moves in a frantic line, but rests steady and still like the granite heart of a mountain peak. Every old mistake, every lingering question, and every unfulfilled expectation has dissolved into the silent air of this dark room, leaving only the soft, effortless rise and fall of your breath. Imagine the quiet forest high above the valley, where the deep snow falls continuously through the pine boughs in total silence. The white flakes settle softly upon the frozen moss, coating the dark bark of the cedars and filling every deep footprint left on the trail earlier today. Beneath that pristine white surface, the fallen pine needles rest undisturbed in the dark loam, slowly transforming into the rich, dark nourish that will feed the roots when the spring thaw arrives. The forest does not hurry the melting of the snow, nor does it lament the long, dark hours of the winter night. It sits in perfect patience, grounded in the deep wisdom that every phase of existence carries its own necessary purpose. There is a profound quiet peace in allowing your spirit to match the silence of that winter forest. You do not need to assemble a successful life out of your memories tonight, nor do you need to prove your worth by carrying old burdens into tomorrow. In this sacred, shadowy space, you are not a scholar counting lost years, a worker measuring achievements, or a person struggling to correct past detours. You are simply awareness itself, resting safely within a warm physical frame, inhaling the cool air and releasing every remaining strain into the dark. Consider how the mountain peak sits beneath the vast night sky. It does not fight the freezing wind that blows across its high ridges, nor does it try to hold on to the warm sunlight of midsummer. It stands steady, open and solid, allowing the clouds, the rain, the snow, and the starlight to pass over its surface without changing its fundamental nature. When you stop fighting the natural movement of time, your heart discovers that same unshakable solidity. You cease to be a fragile leaf blown about by every passing regret, becoming instead the quiet mountain that holds all seasons with equal grace. Feel the heavy, comforting weight of your body pressing down into the mattress beneath you. Allow your shoulders to drop even deeper away from your ears, letting the broad muscles of your back spread out and relax completely. Feel a soothing warmth moving down through your thighs, your knees, and your calves, loosening every tight muscle until your legs feel as heavy and motionless as ancient stone. Your hands lie completely open on the blanket, your palms soft and relaxed, holding nothing, wanting nothing, and reaching for nothing in the dark. If a subtle thought still stirs in the quiet corners of your mind, let it pass by without turning your attention toward it. You do not need to analyze its origin, nor do you need to solve the problem it presents. Watch it float past like a single snowflake, drifting across a dark window, appearing for a brief second before vanishing into the night without a trace. Thoughts are merely temporary ripples upon the vast, quiet surface of your true mind. They hold no permanent substance, and they carry no power to disturb the deep peace that resides within your chest. The world outside your room continues its slow, majestic turn through space, held safely by the quiet laws of nature. The sleeping trees do not worry about when their leaves will return, and the frozen streams do not fret over the ice that covers their waters. Everything in creation understands how to yield to the dark hours, resting deeply so that life may renew itself in its own natural time. You belong to this same earth, made of the same ancient elements, and you carry within you the exact same inherent right to surrender your work and rest. Let the gentle warmth of your bed soak deep into your bones, dissolving the last lingering traces of fatigue from your long journey. The heavy scales of your old regret have been placed down in the soft soil, and the broken glass of your worry has been swept away into the dark. There is nowhere you need to go tonight, no conversation you need to complete, and no burden you need to carry across the threshold of sleep. The dark night holds you in its quiet care, protecting you from every expectation and surrounding you with total peace. Allow your head to sink another inch into the softness of your pillow. Feel the cool air against your cheeks as your breath grows increasingly slow, soft, and shallow. Each breath arrives like a quiet wave brushing against a silent shore, and each breath slips away into the dark, carrying you further into the deep, motionless ocean of rest. Your body is heavy, your mind is clear and spacious, and your spirit is entirely at peace with everything that has ever been. You are completely safe to drop the last thread of waking awareness now. You are safe to let your mind drift into the vast dark quiet where no time exists, no goals remain, and no doubts can reach you. Permit your eyelids to rest heavy and still. Let your tongue soften completely, and allow your entire being to dissolve effortlessly into deep, dreamless, and restorative sleep. And as the last quiet echoes of thought fade into complete silence, let your spirit rest in this final, timeless truth, that the life you thought was passing you by was secretly gathering beneath your feet all along, becoming the soft, dark soil that holds you safely as you sleep. And that soft, dark soil needs no effort from you to stay steady through the long, dark hours of the night. In this deep, unbroken quiet, the last faint echoes of your day dissolve into the cool air of your room. The timeline you tried so hard to measure has lost all its boundaries, stretching out into a vast, silent space where there is no early and no late, no lost years and no missed turns. Everything that ever brought you pain, every moment where you felt you fell behind, has settled quietly into the earth beneath you, becoming nothing more than the gentle foundation that supports your resting frame. Imagine the high mountain forest now. As midnight deepens over the quiet peaks, the fallen pine needles lie buried deep under the soft white blanket of snow, resting in complete darkness. Down in that cold loam, away from the freezing wind and the gray winter light, a quiet transformation continues without any sound. The old withered scales of dropped cones break down slowly, blending with the crushed mineral rock and wet clay to create a rich dark earth that holds the latent warmth of the world. The trees above do not reach down to pull the fallen needles back onto their branches, nor do they monitor the soil to ensure it turns dark quickly enough. They simply stand tall in the still air, letting the night perform its quiet work in its own unhurried time. There is an effortless grace in allowing your own mind to rest in that same patient stillness. You do not need to cultivate wisdom through intense struggle tonight, nor do you need to force your heart to forgive every past detour before morning comes. In this dark, protected sanctuary, you are invited to put down the heavy tools of self-improvement entirely. You do not need to be a better version of yourself right now, nor do you need to prove that you have learned every lesson your past had to teach. You are allowed to be simply a breathing body resting in the quiet dark, held completely by the bed beneath you and the calm air around you. Consider how the fallen pine needle rests upon the forest floor. It does not fight the snow that settles over its surface, nor does it regret the high branch where it once caught the morning sun. It simply rests where it fell, giving its substance back to the ground, trusting that nothing of value is ever truly lost in the great cycle of the forest. When you stop fighting the shape of your past, your mind finds that same profound ease. You no longer need to defend the choices you made years ago, nor do you need to mourn the lives you did not live. You can simply allow every past season to lie quietly where it fell, knowing that it has already become the ground upon which you stand. Feel the deep, restorative heaviness settling into every part of your body. Your feet and ankles are completely relaxed, sinking into the soft warmth of the mattress. Your hips and lower back drop lower, releasing the subtle tension held from hours of walking through the world. Your chest rises and falls with a movement so gentle, so quiet, that it resembles the soft sway of pine branches in a distant breeze. Your hands remain loose and open on the bed sheets, their fingers soft and uncurled, entirely empty of all striving, all holding, and all regret. If a quiet thought floats across the dark space behind your eyes, let it pass without trying to catch it or push it away. You do not need to fix it, examine it, or follow where it leads. View it merely as a single stray snowflake drifting past the window frame, landing softly on the sill and melting into clear water without making a sound. The sky of your awareness remains vast, cool, and undisturbed, holding plenty of room for thoughts to appear and disappear without ever touching the stillness at your core. The quiet night continues to fold around your home, offering a deep, impenetrable shield against every demand of the waking world. The clocks may count their hours in the dark, but here in this quiet space, time has stopped its relentless march. There are no tasks waiting for your attention, no performance being evaluated, and no past errors that require your late-night repair. You are wrapped in a soft, dark peace that asks for nothing, expects nothing, and holds you with total, unconditioned kindness. Let your chin soften, allow your throat to relax, and let your head sink down into the deep comfort of your pillow. Your breath has become so soft, so quiet, that it seems to move through you without any effort at all, like mist drifting through a silent mountain canyon. Each small inhalation brings a cool sense of space to your heart, and each quiet exhalation carries away the very last traces of daytime effort, leaving your spirit light, clear, and completely at rest. You are safe to let go of the last thread of control now. You are safe to let your consciousness slip into the vast, warm dark where no memories weigh upon you, no schedules guide you, and no regrets can follow. Permit your eyes to remain heavy and still in their sockets. Allow your mind to step down from its long watch and let yourself drift effortlessly into the deep, sweet ocean of undisturbed sleep. And as the quiet darkness wraps completely around your resting body, let your spirit sink into this one final, enduring truth. that the life you were always searching for was never lost in the years behind you, but was quietly waiting, all along, in the dark, rich soil of this present breath.